decades, we've adopted a zero-tolerance approach to drug use, with calls for decriminalisation seen as coming from the fringe. But increasingly, decriminalisation is seen as a more effective approach by some countries and people involved in law enforcement around the world.
My name's João McGeary. I was a policeman for 30 years. Also have a graduate diploma in substance abuse studies, and my job is now primarily linking people in with treatment for drug and alcohol addiction. Bear in mind, I'm probably about 3 paces to the right of Attila the Hun. Yeah, sort of strong conservative values, but over a period of time of working in the sector, realising that this war on drugs we're having is not working.
João McGeary is a member of an international organisation called LEAP. That stands for Law Enforcement Against Prohibition. LEAP has more than 15,000 members worldwide, including former and current cops, lawyers, judges and prison workers. The organisation lobbies governments to rethink drug policy.
All we're doing is filling the prisons up with people who are committing crimes to support their drug habits. We've done nothing to reduce drugs.
Former Seattle Police Chief Norm Stamper, another 30-year cop, says decriminalising drugs, even legalising them, is no longer just an idea put forward by addicts and political fringe groups.
Much of the agitation for reform is coming not from drug users, but from people who care about the health and safety of our communities, who care about the civil liberties of free people in your country and in mine, and who care really about keeping drugs out of the hands of our kids. And these are not advocates for drug use at all.
Leap argues that we have to accept the approach we have is not working.
It might sound like I'm promoting illicit drugs. I hate them with a passion. I hate what they do to people.
I totally get it, why a single mom, for example, might be scared to death of any talk of legalization when she's got a 13 or a 14-year-old who she suspects might be experimenting with drugs. But of course, what needs to be told to people like that, who are very responsible parents, is your kids already have great access to illicit drugs.
Those who want to end the war on drugs say that beyond the human cost, there's also an enormous financial burden.
In my country, it has cost us $1 trillion since 1971, when Richard Nixon proclaimed drugs public enemy #1. $1 trillion. Every year we spend another $69 or $70 billion prosecuting that war. And what do we have to show for it? Drugs are more readily available at lower prices and higher levels of potency than since Richard Nixon declared war on them.
The money being spent on fighting drugs could be spent on other things which are more beneficial to the public, spent on welfare, spent on education.
LEAP sees no divide between licit and illicit drugs.
1 in 2 people who smoke tobacco will probably die from it. Alcohol is related to more deaths and domestic violence than cannabis, yet it is legal. We seem to think, oh, it's all right to go out and wipe yourself out on the weekend on alcohol, but Jesus, if you use drugs, if you use heroin or use amphetamines, that's terrible.
Both men agree there is public misunderstanding of who a drug user is to overcome.
There's a stereotype of the junkie, the heroin addict who's lying face down in a urine-filled alley. But there are a whole lot of professional people and blue-collar people and young people and old people and men and women of all colors use drugs. But their lives are not being adversely affected by that. Please don't hear this as promotion or advocacy. It's just simply a reflection of fact.
Debate about the war on drugs is moving beyond localised prohibition. Many people now argue that Western countries are unethical global citizens, that our hardline anti-drug policies lead to the destruction of entire countries in South and Central America.
An inevitable product of prohibition is violence. And it is heartbreaking to read, to hear personal first-hand accounts of the violence on the Mexican border of the United States. The drug cartels are now engaged in a level and a form of violence that is unprecedented.
The only way you can eliminate that illicit drug market that pushes the dealers, the people who are making a lot of money out of people's misery, is to actually legalise it and control it. That's my belief.
A number of countries have already taken steps towards decriminalising the personal use of drugs. Portugal did it back in 2001 and is now seen as a drug policy guinea pig for the rest of the world. A recent report on the 9-year experiment concluded By virtually every metric, the Portuguese decriminalisation framework has been a resounding success. We spoke with João Goulão, the president of Portugal's Institute of Drugs and Drug Addiction.
Some people thought that Portugal would become a paradise of drug addicts. We would have an increase in drug tourism. People would come from all over the world to use drugs in Portugal. In fact, nothing of that happened. We had very good responses with several indicators, like the numbers about AIDS and hepatitis, less experimentation among youngsters, experimentation of all kinds of illicit drugs has dropped from 2001 to 2007, and the impact on Portuguese society, on families' life, on individuals' life has fallen since then, since the decriminalisation happened.
Goulão says treating drug use as a health issue rather than a criminal issue was key to developing effective policy.
It allowed us to develop the responses more clearly, more openly. In terms of prevention, now we can talk openly with everybody, with the young people in schools, and explain it. It's not a taboo.
Goulão emphasises that drugs are still prohibited under the Portuguese model. If you're caught with more than a 10-day supply, it's considered trafficking and you can face jail. If it's less, you face rehabilitation, a fine or community service.
What I would like to stress is I believe that decriminalisation by itself, without working in the fields of treatment, prevention, harm reduction and so on, would not lead us to anywhere.
Any change to our drug laws would require public support. So what does Australia think about current policy? According to the Hungry Beast McNair Ingenuity survey, only 17% of us believe that government policies dealing with illegal drug use are effective. And half the population reckon police resources should be applied to more serious crimes than pursuing people for using small amounts of illegal drugs. When it comes to decriminalisation, it all depends on the drug in question. 52% of us are in favour of decriminalising marijuana, but support for extending that to other drugs is much lower. Why? Well, perhaps one of the reasons can be seen in another of the survey's findings. 62% of us think other people would use drugs more often if they were decriminalised, but only 3% say they personally would. We define the people who can't be trusted with drugs as everyone but ourselves.